It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by Audible.com. You go to audibletrial.com/Opperman Report. You sign up for free. It's free to sign up, and then you get yourself a free audio book. And I think the whole first month, I think you can get a whole bunch of books for free, as many as you want. This is one of our shows that we're doing for the members section. It's pre-recorded. And what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the members section for members only. And then about a month later, month and a half, we'll put it in rotation on all the stations. It'll be on late night in the Midlands on Tuesday afternoons. It'll be on FPRN radio Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. On FPRN radio. It'll be on Para X radio Saturday night, 7 p.m. Pacific time, which is CBS radio. Then we'll have it on a Blog Talk Radio on Penny Entertainment. They play us on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. And let's see, it'll also be available on Spreaker, iHeart Radio, TuneIn, and Stitcher, and also MyStream Radio, which is a brand new one that we just hooked up with. And also, too, we got a couple of stations we're picking up. I'm sure by the time that we play this, play it in rotation, you'll be hearing us on some additional stations that we're picking up all the time. Now, today, we have with us a British journalist named Christine Joanna Hart. And one of the topics, she had a fascinating story, this woman here. We're going to let her describe herself, but she was brought up in an orphanage where she was abused, and then came out of there and kind of went to work for the intelligence services in the UK and wound up with the IRA, and then wound up behind the scenes in the UK cell phone hacking scandal that went on with Rupert Murdoch and the. So fascinating stuff. She also wrote a book called, the first book was Searching for Daddy, about her experience in the orphanage and searching for her father, I suppose. And also, too, another one about the serial killers, Kenneth Bianchi, and his buddy. We got to look into that, too, as well. So, Christine, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi, Ed. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I've been better, but I'm okay. We'll get through this. So tell us about yourself and about your background, and I know you're a journalist now, so tell us about yourself, and then we'll get into these books and stuff.
Yeah, I grew up in an orphanage. It was the Jesuit-run Crusade. It had a very grand name, the Crusade of Rescue. I was adopted from there when I was 5, and I was taken to a very, very Catholic family. The head of that family was a nun called Sister Kathleen Hart. And she was quite high up in the Daughters of St. Paul. They're an order quite close to the Pope. I think they're based in Boston, actually, because I went back and forth to Boston.
Wait a second. Is that the Sisters of St. Paul or the Daughters of St. Paul?
Daughters of St. Paul.
Okay, really? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And she oversaw my upbringing. They were a very strict family. My adoptive father was sexually abusive to me, and I always suspected that the Crusade of Rescue was involved in that, but I couldn't, obviously, I didn't have any proof. My memory was pretty hazy, and I'd had therapy for the sexual abuse, and I'd regained my memories of my father. But I always thought the Crusade of Rescue was complicit in it somehow. They put me back in care when I was 13, and from then on I spent the rest of the time in care. Then I had a brief time in the territorial army, and I met somebody who introduced me to the world of private investigation, like yourself, Ed. And
big mistake, huh?
Oh, I know. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
And I joined them. I ended up working for the agencies that are ex-MI6. One of the companies I worked for was Michael Oatley's company It's called CIEX Limited, and that is it's hidden. It's called Company X, but that's hidden in CIEX Limited. It's like CIE is company, and then it's got the X tagged on the end.
Gotcha.
And that's Oatley's company. He liaised with the IRA in the 70s, and I worked for them for a while, and I also worked for a company called Argon, and he was South African secret police boss. I'm sure you've heard of them. And so I spent my time in that world, and then I decided to go and work for the News of the World. I started off slowly, and I had a break where I went over to live in Los Angeles, and I did Arthur Janoff's Primal Therapy for about a year, and then I came back and I got myself a flat very close to the News of the World, and I started working for them doing all their investigations work. I was on about $100,000 a year, doing everything really for them. You can imagine, what it was. Undercover. I went undercover with Mazza Mahmood, the fake sheikh who did the sting on Sarah Ferguson, and just everything really. I mean, we went to Sylvester Stallone's wedding. He was the fake sheikh there. We met Stallone, and it was a very glamorous time in my life. I had a little sports car, and I thought it was never going to end until the phone hacking. I don't know if you want to get into that first or the IRA. Shall I tell you?
Well, wait. First, tell us. Let's start off with the first book, Searching for Daddy. Now, because I know it describes how you were abused in these orphanages run by the Daughters of St. Paul, which is very interesting because my father worked for the Sisters of St. Paul as an accountant. Isn't that a weird coincidence, right?
Yeah.
Now, now, how old were you when this was going on in this first orphanage? And this was in Boston, in the United States.
No. That was in London, in Westminster, which I was born in there. Well, I wasn't born in there. My mother was a teenager, and she kind of had me in a mother and baby home.
Gotcha.
Not sure who my father was, and she was, one of these children's, mother and baby places, and then that was attached to the orphanage, and then, then I went in there in the Crusade of Rescue. Interestingly, after I was adopted, they had these parties twice a year where we'd all go back, which is all very creepy, really.
Well, let me ask you this. Were you ever able to track down your mother or your father, your birth parents?
Yeah, I did. It was just after I wrote Searching for Daddy, and I wrote that, and that was published by Hodder and Stoughton, and Hodder and Stoughton wanted me to track down my parents. And, I said to them, well, I've tried to do it, but I made a conscious effort, and I tracked down my mother, and she was, I think, about 13 when she had me. And I spoke to her over the phone, and I didn't really like her. I didn't gel with her, and she wasn't very apologetic. I told her what had happened to me, and I think of it, if I'd have had a child adopted and they came back and said, I had this really bad time, the first words out of your mouth would be an apology, and that wasn't forthcoming with her. I didn't like her at all, and I wanted to find out who my father was. It said on the birth certificate unknown, and she told me it was someone called Tom Hogan, an Irish boxer and semi-professional boxer. So I managed to track him down, and I had a meeting with him. He said he knew about me, but he was, I think he was about 20 or something at the time, and which is odd, because if he was 20 and she was 13, then surely he should have been arrested, but hey-ho. And I met him at my tennis club, and he had dark brown hair and dark brown eyes, and she'd sent me a picture of her, and she had dark brown eyes and dark brown hair, and of course I'm a blue-eyed blonde. So I just thought that they weren't my parents. I really didn't. And I said to him, look, I'm not being funny, but I don't think you're my father. And he said to me, oh, well, why are you concerned with hair colouring? And I said, because I've investigated it, and, I am a private investigator, and it doesn't stack up. brown and brown can't produce a blue. And, I don't really know what went on there, but there we are.
Now you're saying that your mom, she was 13 when she had, now she actually went to live in this home while she was pregnant to give birth to you and then give you up?
That's right, yeah. And it was organized by the Catholic religion. She told me a priest organized it. So it's all very kind of, I don't know, weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, did she discuss with you any other abuse that she might have gone through or any kind of...
No, she didn't, no.
Okay. And do you know what she's doing now? What does she do now?
She works at the council doing something or other. I was, she kept saying to me, oh, do you want to get your own back on me? Oh, are you going to take revenge? And I'm like, well, no, that hasn't actually occurred to me. And she kept saying it. And quite frankly, I felt it was an insult to me, and I just thought, well, why do I have to hear this of somebody? And I didn't bother speaking to her then after that. So, yeah.
Gotcha. And now, the boxer, what does he do for a living now?
Oh, he died.
Okay.
He got cancer and he died. And interestingly, his brother told me he's dying of cancer. And then he said, oh, actually, it was a week later. He said, oh, he's dead. So I said, well, can I come to the funeral? And he said, well, his daughter doesn't want you to. So I emailed his daughter on Facebook. And she said, well, you're a bastard and nobody wants you around. So that was nice.
That's unusual as well, okay. Because a lot of times, especially a half-sister would want to check things out. But okay. And now,
I've got, according to, he had, there's a boy and a girl on his side, and there's a boy and a girl on her side. So actually, I'm sitting here with no family at all, and I've got all this family, supposedly. But, once I came across this, as we'll get into later, this monarch mind control stuff, and I moved in the community of the monarch mind control, I've been told that possibly they're nothing to do with me. Right. And interestingly, it said on my birth certificate, the 16th of November, and no, it said she told me that she had her child on the 15th. And I said, well, I was born on the 16th. And she said, well, my child was born. So I thought that was a little bit odd, actually. Okay.
Now, and then you said that you would go back for parties back to this orphanage every year?
Yeah. I always found that strange. And I found it strange that I can't remember much about them, although I have in my possession, and my brother has, my adopted brother, pictures of me and him at the parties. But I can't remember them. I can remember flash-ins. I can remember my adoptive father walking amongst the orphans and them grabbing onto his legs. And I felt very uncomfortable because in my mind, when you're adopted, you're adopted. Why would you go back to the orphanage twice a year? It seemed to me to be quite sick somehow, even, as a child I found it, I think, a bit, ooh. And I was always told to concentrate on the ice cream and jelly. It was like a chant. Think about the ice cream and jelly. And I remember thinking, well, I don't actually want to think about ice cream and jelly. But that was what we were told.
Okay, and now you said that when you came out of there, you went to the territories. Is that like the military?
No, I just did it as a hobby, really. Territorial Army is a kind of that was a hobby, but that was where I met. A lot of ex-army guys, and I dated an ex-army guy, and they were forming a detective agency, and they were looking for girls, like to go undercover and that kind of stuff.
But I've never heard that expression, Territorial Army. What is that? What is that exactly?
Oh, it's a part-time thing. It's a little bit. It's like it's not the actual army. It's like a part-time where you go along and you can train, but you're not in the army. It's like
the National Guard we have here.
Possibly, I don't know.
The National Guard is it's like a state army where you go in on. They call them weekend warriors. They go on the weekends and they live at home and they go for training every now and then. But if there's a big thing, they can call them up and sometimes send them overseas even to fight. Or if there's like a flood here, they can call them into action and they have to go. But you get a good paycheck for it. You get like $1,000 a month. That's not a bad deal. It's that kind of thing?
Yes, that kind of thing, but it's voluntary. You don't get paid.
Oh, really? Okay, no, this you get paid here, yeah. Yeah, in America, we don't do anything for free.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, we're capitalists, yeah. Oh, my God. Okay, so then, and then that was like your first job, was being a
No. Well, no, not really. My first job was, the first job where you get paid was as a private detective.
Right.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think myself too as well. No, I had like a couple of really quick jobs. I did like in a laundry and stuff like that. But my first real job was PI work. Yeah. Okay, very interesting. So then, and that's where you started hooking up with all these PIs and stuff like that. And then what came next?
Well, then came the news of the world. I mean, I was no. Actually, there's something happened between that. When I was at my adoptive home, I found a book on Ian Brady, the Moors murderer, and it's a book called Beyond Belief, and it portrays Brady in a very interesting way. It sort of brings in the supernatural, and it's like, oh, the Marquis de Sade was watching from a distance and rode off on his horse, and it kind of captured my imagination, and I was interested in this sort of dark figure, and I wrote to Ian Brady at his prison, and of course the letters didn't get through. And then when I went into care from when I was 13 to 18, and then oddly enough, my adoptive family had me back, and I lived with them.
No, wait a second. You were removed from your adopted family because of the molestation.
No, they chucked me out,
They
actually.
chucked you out, okay. And then you went into care, which I guess we would call here foster care.
No, it was a children's home.
Like a children's home, okay. And what about in the children's home? Any kind of activity going on there? Any kind of abuse or anything there?
Oh, God, no. All the boys were abused,
Really? Okay.
which was quite horrid. But the girls weren't touched. Strange. I thought it was strange. I remember I was quite a strong figure there. And I remember one of the boys telling me he'd been abused by a social worker, and the social worker was in our home that night, and I got all the boys together and we went down there and we said, right, let's, give him what for. It's sad because a lot of the boys became suicidal, and, they thought that they were gay, and, their sexuality was confused. It was pretty bad, actually.
So in this youth home type of situation, there was widespread homosexual abuse of the boys.
Yeah.
Okay, but not the girls.
The girls weren't touched. It was odd, isn't it?
That is odd. Yeah, but when you start looking at this stuff, that's what comes up. So then you're around 18 years old, and you start writing to this guy, this Ian Brady.
Yeah.
And is that when you wrote the book In for the Kill: A True Story of Hunting Evil?
No. That came much later. I wrote to Brady, and then I had a weird, just to stick on the timeline, Ed. I had a strange experience. I was back then, how old was I? 22, and I was doing private investigation work, and Brady the Moors killer invited me to come and see him, which was all very odd.
Wait, now, did he invite you because he remembered the letter you sent him, or just out of the blue?
Oh, yeah. Oh, obviously it was for the letter.
Okay.
But here was somebody that wasn't letting anybody see him,
Okay.
Apart from Lord Longford, he hadn't seen anybody, I think, since he'd been in prison. And I wrote to him. The letter got through because he got moved to an insane asylum. And he immediately said he wanted me to come and see him, which was quite a startling thing. I mean, I was only young, I was blonde, and he said it was because I sent him a letter, a poem. I sent him a poem by William Blake, Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright in the Forest of the Night. Do you know it?
No, it sounds familiar, but I don't know it well, no.
Oh, right, it's about Tiger. So I sent him that, and he was like, he wanted to meet me because that intrigued him. And I went up there, and I had about a 2-hour meeting with him. There was someone in the room with us. And I came out, and I thought, man, he was really boring. You know, I was this blonde working class girl. I just found him very boring. The next thing, the press wrote about a blonde girl who had visited Brady, the first person that had gone anywhere near this serial killer in years. And I was quite afraid because I thought, well, that's me. And I spoke to a private investigator I knew called Alan Graham, and he said, "Oh, you best come and meet me, and let's talk about this." So I went to meet him in a pub, and he had arranged for two tabloid journalists from the Sunday People to be there to meet me.
Right.
Which was, I believe, he was paid £5,000.
It's so typical, you know.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was there, and I thought to myself, oh my God, what do I tell these two journalists? And I had at one point when I felt so fascinated by Brady, I thought, I wonder if I'm related to this guy. Why am I so fascinated to the supernatural or what have you? And my mother had come from up north from the Manchester area, and I thought, well, maybe, so I said to these journalists, I said, well, at one point, I thought I might have been related to the guy. That's why, I was busy not wanting them to think I was interested in the dark side. Now, looking back, obviously, it's silly, isn't it? But, if you're a working class girl, the press seem to you like gods, absolute right. Gods. And I was terrified that they would print that I was interested in, the occult or the dark side, whatever. So they said, oh, you thought he was your long-lost father? And I'm like, yeah. And next thing, they printed it all over the front pages, the newspaper. They whipped me off to the south of France, where the young journalist I was with, we rather fell in love, and we had a sort of little affair. And I came back and I moved in with him, and he trained me in journalism.
Now, how old were you at this time?
I was getting on, 22, 23.
Okay. But now you're saying, this Brady guy, though, this Ian Brady, were his murders, were they occultish type murders or ritual type?
Yeah, they were ritual. He killed very young victims, and they were, made to pose in the sign of the cross. He buried them, he shook his fist at the sky to God. There's so much occult links to, very much so, yeah.
Okay, very interesting, okay.
He calls himself and his girlfriend, who he killed, with demon folk. He said he gave sacrifices to a demon that appeared to him called the Face of Death.
Really? Now, is he still around now, or is he gone?
Yeah, no, he's still around. He was very angry by searching for Daddy. I didn't want to call it that, by the way. He was very angry about that. He said that I had cozied up to him merely to write a book. But I hadn't, obviously, at the time. I had no intention of... Once I'd met him, I found him quite boring. He's very much... I do believe that he was used by certain supernatural forces and then left, which is very different from Bianchi. Now, Bianchi's a totally different kettle of fish. Bianchi's fascinating. But I found Brady quite dull, and I didn't want to write to him anymore. But, of course, when I moved in with Phil Hall, he was immediately, oh, you are going to carry on writing to Brady, aren't you? And I'm like, well, no. And he was, oh, please. So, I ended up having to write back and fro to Brady and got to know him probably more than anyone else has, which went in the book, Searching for Daddy.
And then, so then much, much later, though, around 2013, you wrote this book about In for the Kill, a true story of hunting evil. And that, you also, this more recently, you met the Hillside Strangler. And what went on with Kenneth Bianchi here in America? How did that come about?
Yeah, well, that was odd because I was watching TV one day, and there was a crime drama about him, and they were talking about Steve, an alter ego that supposedly did the murders, and I thought, wow, that's fascinating. Was he possessed? And I thought, so I Googled it, and I found the psychiatrist at the time called Ralph Allison, and I emailed him, and I said, I'm very interested in this Steve character. Is it sort of something to do with a demon and he interestingly said that, well, it might be. And he said, and everyone, if you Google it, people say, well, no, he put it on. He feigned this alter personality.
Right. What year did you contact the psychiatrist?
2009.
Okay, 2009. Okay, go ahead.
And I also contacted a guy called Chris Berry D, who's an English criminologist, and he had met Bianchi, and we talked back and fro, and he said, oh, you'll never get a reply from him. He said he wrote for a while. He met him, but only was allowed to meet him for 5 minutes because Bianchi's so, shut down. He won't speak to anybody. Okay. And I sent a letter, didn't hear back, and meanwhile, I was talking to Ralph Allison, and Ralph Allison sent me his medical file, all his medical records, which I suppose is a bit odd for him to do, but I'm like, thank you very much. And so I looked through them, and it's fascinating. It's stuff that hasn't actually come out yet, and it's all, it didn't come out at the time, which is interesting. It's all the transcripts of Steve talking. Now, this character, Steve, is absolutely fascinating. And then you go to read what Bianchi said, and Bianchi's quite dull and boring, but the Steve character is absolutely fascinating. I mean, it sends chills up your spine. The way he communicates is totally different to Bianchi. And so what I did, I then wrote to Bianchi again.
Wait, one second, said, but you have written transcripts of this or recordings?
Transcripts.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you can see them if you like. I'll send them over.
Oh, I would love to see them. Yeah, we'll put them up in the member section. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But go ahead. This is fascinating. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is quite interesting. I found it interesting. And so I wrote to Bianchi again, and I said, listen, I know you don't reply to people, blah, 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 but I've got this thing from Ralph Allison, and, I want to talk to you about Steve. And I mentioned that I knew Chris Berry D, and couldn't believe it. A week later, I got a response from him. Unbelievable. And I replied back, and next thing he said, oh, come and see me. So I'm like, oh, great. And I thought, I looked into the fares, and it's £800 to travel over to Washington. So I thought, well, I'm going to get a newspaper to pay my way. And the date he'd given me to come and see him was Valentine's Day, unbelievably. Oh, so I wrote a piece called Valentine's Day with the Hillside Strangler, and I was trying to get it out. And interestingly, Nick Davies, who works for The Guardian, he was all over me at that point for the phone hacking to find out what's gone on. And I wouldn't speak to him. And I said to him, I tell you what, I said, you get this piece in the paper, you get me $2,000 to go and see Bianchi, and I'll talk to you. So he came back to me, he said, the Guardian will take it. And so I said, fine. And I spoke to the Guardian about it. They gave me a contract for the piece, and they paid my fare. And they said, we want it for the front page of the Guardian magazine. Turned out when I came back, they said, no, it's too sympathetic for Bianchi, and we're not going to run it. We'll put it in Reader's Experience. And, of course, I was quite upset because I wanted to be paid for it. And in the end, they put it in Reader's Experience. And instead of paying me the £500 you're supposed to get from the Reader's Experience, they said, no, you've already had your money. I mean, God, what creeps completely.
Yeah, but that's typical. That's typical as well with these tabloids that they don't pay and they try and get out of paying you.
Well, The Guardian is a broadsheet and is supposed to be one of our most respectable papers. And quite frankly, to put me in Reader's Experience, I don't even read their newspaper, so that's a lie. And secondly, they made out that I was visiting all for a little adventure. Nowhere in the piece did they mention I'm a journalist. So, it's hanging there on the internet, and quite frankly, I don't think it makes me look very good,
Well, okay, we'll get the word out, set the record straight. But now, what about now? A question I have for you though is Bianchi. Was he aware of the things that Steve was saying and doing, or was he surprised to read his own transcripts?
Well, I sent it to him, and also, interestingly, at the time he drew some pictures. He drew a picture of Ken, he drew a picture of Billy, which was a little boy inside him, and he drew a picture of Steve. Now, when you see these pictures, Steve is just really fascinating. And I said, oh, look at this. And also, he did handwriting. And when he wrote Steve, he wrote the name Steve, and I don't know what second name he used. He wrote underneath, there was a gap that said parents' names, and he wrote no parents. And then Ken, he put Ken, and then his parents. And the handwriting is completely different. And I took it to an expert because, people are saying, oh, Bianchi's lied, he made it up. And they said it's really, really hard to fake different handwriting. And, of course, if he did come out with all the stuff that Steve did, he'd have to be really highly imaginative. And that's what I wanted to do, to go and see Bianchi, to look him in the eye and talk to him about Steve and to find out, did he make it up? Was it fake? Or is it some, who is Steve? Is he floating around? Who is it? I found that fascinating. I needed to know. So
now,
what?
There's one set of theory that this is like a multiple personality disorder. That because when you have a trauma as a child, that you develop these different personalities. But now, do you believe it's that, or you believe it was a demon possession of Bianchi?
I think now that he's definitely got alters. When I sat with him, I had 2 days with him. I had Valentine's Day, and I had the day before, which was the 13th. And I spent 8 hours on one day, 8 hours on the next day, and he's interesting. He's not a normal guy. He's fascinating. When you sit with him, he's almost listening through his skin. He's really interesting. He's very, very weird. He's much more interesting than Brady, who's like a straightforward person. That you think, oh God, please let me out of here. You're boring me. Bianchi has different aspects of him. He has a child side. He had a side that sat there and threatened me. He said, I think you're working in cahoots with Chris Berry D, and, I want to kill Chris Berry D, and do you know what I mean by murder and all this kind of stuff. And I wasn't scared because I'd hung out with people like that before. We talk about killing. And but he did, when I was sitting with him, he did, at one point, he looked at me and I felt almost as if I was in the presence of, one of those Nazis like Mengele or something. And I just felt my whole body feel utter terror, and it was really weird. It's almost like I was looking at him and he was normal, and I felt something underneath, and I really felt it, and it was horrible, actually.
Now, is he still alive today?
Oh, yeah. He wrote to me a while ago. Other than that, he sent me all his novels, all his poetry. He denies he did it. He denies Steve, and yet in one of his poems, he's gloating about the murders. It's something, I can't remember how it goes. I put it in the book. It's something like, all eve she weeps her tears like sewers, something like that. And he's gloating about it, and he says it replays in his wintered, shattered mind when no one else can see. I had a really weird experience with Bianchi, which I'll tell you about. It was in the middle of writing to him, and it was quite an intense back and fro. And I had a weird feeling one day of almost something watching me in the house. And I thought, well, that's weird. Just had a weird feeling. And I was watching TV one day, and it was almost like, just for a fraction of a second, somebody had almost pushed me out of the way and was trying to look through my eyes. And it was just maybe even less than a second. And I just sort of went, what the hell was that? And then all of a sudden, really horrible images flashed into my mind, and I got the feeling of Bianchi. I knew it was connected in some way to Bianchi. And I was really terrified. I went to my priest, the Catholic Church that I knew well, and I spoke to him about it. And then I rang Chris Berry-D, and I thought, well, I want to ask Chris about this, but I don't want to lead him. I don't want to say, oh, I've had this happen. And I was also scared, I think, that he, wouldn't qualify it. So I didn't know how to bring it up. And I said, Chris, I said, did you notice anything weird when you were dealing with Bianchi? And he went, oh, you mean the bit where he tries to get inside your mind? And I'm like, holy shit. I said, did he do it to you? And he went, yep, he did it to me. And he said, I nearly went crazy. And I'm like, oh my God. And he said, Chris, we should do a book about it. And I'm like, well, yeah, we should do a book about it. We fell out, actually. Chris does tend to get a little bit overexcited. But he's gone ahead. He's written the book, he's called it Emissaries of Satan. He's quoted me a lot in it, but he hasn't written, I don't think that he's written about what happened to both of us. And I think that is quite interesting, about, what went on. If Bianchi is one of these people that have had mind control, I suppose he would have different alters, and the alter that did the murders would have the demonic attached to it. So he would have this power to remote view, to, if somebody didn't like him, he could kind of, haunt them, whatever. He's definitely got something going on. I don't know what it is. I wrote to him and I said straight out, I said, look, I know you've got something going on with you, and Chris Berry-D has experienced it. I've experienced it. I don't particularly like it. Would you care to tell me, what it is? And he denied it. When I was face to face with him, I said, you're into the occult, aren't you? He's got this Satan's own tattoo on his arm.
Oh, really?
I said, well, huh?
I said, oh, really? Satan's own, it says?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I made him roll his sleeve up and had a look at it. And I said, I said, you're a Satanist then, aren't you? And he's like, no, it's just a joke. And, oh, really? And I said to him, I think you're probably into the occult. And he, oh, no, I don't like anything like Satanism. Anyway, all the short stories that he sent me are occult stories. Unbelievable. And they're all about...
Did you publish any of those stories in your book?
No, I couldn't. I wanted to quote them. I wanted to quote his letters, which, I have got a wardrobe with a box in it, which is full of his letters. I've got so much material from him. It's unreal. The publisher wouldn't let me put not one word of his in the book. Not one word.
Why not?
Mad, really.
Why not?
Oh, he might sue us. We don't want him to sue us. That would be horrid, wouldn't it?
But wait a second, because you told me earlier that his doctor had sent you his medical records. Now if he was going to sue you, wouldn't he be suing you over that? That's all kinds of HIPAA violations and Privacy Act violations. How was his doctor able to get away with sending that to you?
No, well, nobody knows about it, actually.
Okay, we won't mention it again.
Until now, Ed, until now.
Okay, all right. Well, they're going to call me defendant next. Okay. Co-defendant.
Let's get in trouble. Let's put this on the air. No, poor guy. I think he's very old, Ralph Ellison, now. I was quite shocked when he did it. I was like, yes. I couldn't believe it. I was so happy,
Okay, so you have all this material. Great. Then hang on to that. Now, how old is Bianchi now?
60.
Okay, all right, okay.
He put me in touch with his mother. He put me in touch with all his relatives. I managed to get in there quite close, which was what I wanted to do, and just, basically find out about Steve. I do think he's a multiple. I do, and he covers it up. I think when he got caught, I think he wanted to tell, and I think he feigned a multiple, but he has got one. But I think with him, he can't control it, and I think he feigned it. So that's why you see these videos with him feigning. You also see him saying it's called Steve Walker, and of course Steve Walker was a guy, he nicked his credentials. That doesn't mean that he's not a multiple or hasn't got alters. I think he's got co-consciousness with his alters. I think that he he knew what he was doing when he was killing, and I think he enjoyed it. He enjoyed the demonic. He enjoyed that he had another side of him that could play the nice guy, and he does that now. You know, he puts the nice side forward.
Okay.
But I did see that other side when I met him. You know, he wanted to show me that other side, I think, you know.
Couple of questions for you. Okay, now you met his mother, you met his family. When you talked to them, was there any signs with any kind of generational type of abuse or ritual activity or anything like that?
Yeah. I think definitely with his mother. I only spoke to Frances over the phone. She died then. She dropped dead. She's very strong. And of course, Bianchi comes from an old school Catholic family. She adopted him. And of course, there was sexual abuse. He denies the sexual abuse, of course, as they do. But he said, you know, he had a very religious, strict upbringing. But Chris Berry-D and we both concur on the fact that Bianchi was the leader in the Hillside Stranglings, definitely. Now, they make out in the books that have been written about him that he was just the one that went along with the whole thing. But you only have to meet Bianchi, and it's not that, oh, well, he's been in prison, of course he's going to be a hard man. It's not that. He's got this demonic air about him that you just know that he was the leader. And, you know, it makes sense when you see the trial. Angelo was kind of quite quiet and he didn't say anything. And then he's confessed in the transcript as Steve that he led his cousin into it. You know, he lured him in, and he boasts it was easy to lure him in. You know, it's this demonic altar that he's got that I don't know how he got like that. Did they fiddle with him?
Well, then let me ask you this. Now, back to the sexual abuse of Bianchi. How did that occur? Who was doing it?
Well, they say his mother did it, don't they? They say his mother took him to hospitals, and you know, she fiddled with him, and in his medical records as well, it's got, you know, always fiddling with him, and, you know, he can't pee properly, and, you know, fiddle, you know, that kind of thing. Interestingly, when I sat with Bianchi, he's got one eye was looking at me almost as if he was, like, attracted to me. You know, the way men have a glint in their eye sometimes when they're looking at you.
I get that look all the time, yeah.
When they're flirting, one eye was looking at me in that way, and the other eye was dead. And I thought that was quite odd, because I was looking from one to the other thinking, what the hell is going on there? That's interesting. And then I was reading in a David Icke book recently, he mentioned the monarch mind control, and he's done a picture of someone with a butterfly over their mouth, and the eyes, he's done just like Bianchi's eyes. One of them was alive, and the other was dead. I found that quite curious. I said to him, do you know your eyes are different? One is dark and the other's... And he went, no, they're not. And I thought, sorry, but I'm looking at them, you know. And interestingly, they changed colour, which I've heard that Ted Bundy's changed colour, and Bianchi's changed colour, which is odd, isn't it?
That is very interesting. Now, another thing, too, is... you mentioned how you felt that Bianchi came and visited you, you know, in the spirit, I guess, right? Now, and I've also heard some other things. You've also described this at other times as well. Now, when did those type of experiences start for you in your life? That you have these dreams and visits?
And what, sorry, dream visits?
Yeah, like some people would visit you in a dream, like you were talking about on Facebook a few minutes ago, and you felt that Bianchi came and visited you in your home in the spirit realm. When did you first start experiencing that type of thing in your life? Well,
it was interesting, actually. After I wrote In for the Kill, it was published, it was out there. This is quite recently. It was published 2011. I'm interested in aliens. I've always been interested in the Greys. You know, I watched Communion when it came out. I've never been, at that point, I'd never been abducted or anything by them. And I, you know, I've read about abductions. I always thought, God, why are those people moaning? That must be a fantastic experience. And I joined Fritz Springmeier. Have you heard of him?
Sure.
Yeah, I joined him on Facebook. I found he's not really known in England, but I found him on Google, and so I joined him. And I was talking about my book, In for the Kill, to him, And this woman, an American woman called Anna Hart, she said to me, "Oh, I'm going to read your book." And so she went off, and then she came back and she private messaged me, and she said, "Oh, Christine, I've read In for the Kill, and I want to tell you that you're a monarch mind control victim." And of course, I immediately thought, "Oh, okay, thanks." I thought, well, she's obviously mad, but her picture looks so stunningly beautiful, and she's American. I thought, well, I'm not going to sort of click defriend. I'll, let her carry on saying all these weird things to me. And I did Google it, and, I investigated a bit, but I thought, what a load of crap that is. I'll leave that to the Americans to believe in that. And she said, "Oh, Chris, why not join a recovery group for people that have had this done to them?" So I thought, I didn't want to offend her. So I said, yeah, join me to this group. It was called Overcomers Ministry. So I was hanging out in this group, and I began to think, well, why don't I write about this mind control stuff, maybe do a novel or stuff like that. So I found myself thinking, well, I'm eavesdropping on these people, and I felt a little bit guilty about it. Anyway, one time she mentioned Colonel Aquino, and I thought, wow, what a name, Aquino, and a colonel. Oh, and he's, a mind control person. I thought, surely that's not true. It just sounded straight out of a comic book. So I Googled him, and I found, just bits and pieces. I read, and I thought, well, it's not very interesting after all. I didn't have time, but I thought, well, I made a note of him, and I'll do it later. Meanwhile, when I was on this thread, I got talking to another girl called Louise Clark, and Louise Clark said something about having memories of my sexual abuse, and I said, well, interestingly enough, I've tried to have hypnosis to get my memories of the Crusade of Rescue, and I can't really, although I remember my father sexually abusing me, I know there's more, and I can't get to a lot of my memories, and I've had hypnosis. And she said, well, what happened? And I said, there's a block. And she said, oh, what kind of block? And I said, it's actually a block. And she said, well, what does it look like? And I said, it's a screen, like a screen made of wood. And she said, is there anything on it? And I said, yeah, Donald Duck, a cartoon. And she said, oh, it's classic, that's cartoon programming.
Well, let me interrupt you for a second, because what I actually wanted to get to was, because you mentioned having this experience with Bianchi. Now, was that the first time you ever had that type of visitation was with Bianchi?
No, I did have it around Brady as well. I was writing a letter to Brady. I was in my room at my adoptive parents' house, and I was writing him a letter one night, and all of a sudden I felt like a shimmering. I kind of felt as if it felt like there was someone in the room like watching me, and I looked up and thought, what? And it was almost like there was someone there, but you look up and there's no one there, and I thought, what? And the air kind of shimmered, and I thought, oh, holy shit. And I literally ran out of my bedroom, my boyfriend lived up the road, and I ran out of the house. It was about 3 a.m, and I ran to his house, banged the door down. I said, oh my God, I think I conjured up a bloody spirit or something. And I wouldn't go back to my room until he came. But it didn't happen again. And the second time was Bianchi. And then the third time, I was just about to tell you, shall I carry on with that story?
But that's very interesting, because so this is a rare occurrence in your life, to have this kind of visitation in the spirit world kind of thing.
Yeah, it's rare.
Wait, and the first time was with this guy who was a serial killer and you believe a Satanist.
Yes.
Or Brady. The second time, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think that was him. It definitely wasn't him. It was just I don't know what it was. It wasn't him. It didn't feel like it was demonic or anything. It just felt like it was someone standing there. It was horrid. I didn't care for that.
Second time was Bianchi.
That was definitely evil. That wasn't nice at all.
And the third time was this Colonel Michael Aquino.
Yeah.
Who's alleged to be these kind of things, but there's no convictions or anything. No.
Shall I tell you that story?
You told me the story off the air, so we can get into that a little bit too. But I don't want to miss out on all the stuff about the the hacking and stuff like that as well. So give us now. You started having these experiences in these dreams, and you were contacting these people on Facebook. So go continue with that.
Yeah. Well, actually, the Bianchi bit the Aquino bit does come next, and it kind of leads back to the hacking, because I'd written this book, and it was odd because I'd already had someone interested in doing a film about searching for Daddy. Jane Campion had contacted me over Searching for Daddy and said, could she make a film of the book? So I said, well, yeah, obviously, I want the money. And she went to a few studios and she couldn't get it. She couldn't get it published, and she couldn't get it accepted. There was a few comments in the newspapers made the news that Sienna Miller was going to play me and Anthony Hopkins was going to play Brady. And then in the second book, In for the Kill, I had Channel 4 come and say, oh, can we do a documentary about your life? And I said, well, what's the story? Being a journalist myself, I said, what's the story? And they said, your attraction to evil. So I'm like, well, I don't think I have got an attraction to evil. And they said, no, clearly you have, because in For the Kill, it goes from Brady to the real IRA, to the phone hacking, and then to Bianchi. And it didn't come up with any conclusions at the end, which I hoped I would come to some kind of conclusion about my own life. But it didn't, obviously. And I said, well, to be honest, I'm not that happy about, what are you going to say? And they said, well, a woman's profound attraction to evil. And I thought, well, I don't mind doing journalism that's honest, but quite frankly, I didn't think that was the case with me. But I did look at myself. And then, back to this thing with Louise. Louise, on this mind control group, she said to me, oh, that's classic Donald Duck programming. And I thought, oh, please. Again, I thought, well, this is mad stuff, this monarch mind control stuff. But I Googled it, and it came up Donald, I then looked into it. And the Colonel Aquino, I thought, well, I'm going to look into that as well. And Louise said to me to get different exercise books and try and talk to different parts of me. And so I brought these little diaries, and she said, buy some felt tips and try and work out, have you got different parts to yourself? And I worked out I did actually have different parts. Not that I'm not conscious of the different parts, but I did have separate kind of parts. And one of them I could see in my mind's eye, but I couldn't reach it. And I said to Louise, I can see it's almost like I can see a girl, and I can't reach her. And she's almost like frozen almost, but I can't reach her. So she said, keep trying to talk to her. And it was one night I had this weird experience. I made a diary for her, and I tried to write something in it. It's like an exercise. You try and put yourself into them heads and try and write as them. And I picked up the diary I had allotted for this frozen part of me, and I wrote in it Project Aquino. And I thought, well, that's odd, isn't it? And I was trying to find out, did this Colonel Aquino ever go to my Jesuit-run orphanage, Crusade of Rescue? I know he was in London, and I sent him an email, and I said, I'm a journalist, I'm trying to find out, were you in London? I perhaps wasn't honest. I should have said, oh, I'm trying to find out, did you interfere with me as a kid? But I didn't say that, and I kept it very very professional, And one night I'd just spoken to Louise, and I said, do you know what, I still can't talk to this part of me, and it's quite unusual. I can see it in my mind's eye, and I find it quite interesting. And she said, just lay on the bed and think about it. So I laid on the bed, and I was trying to think about it, and all of a sudden I saw this giant rabbit in my mind's eye, but it seemed really, 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 really real. And it was horrible, because I don't really like animals that much to be. Well, I like dogs, but not rabbits. And I just thought, oh God! And I'd had a dream about rabbits before, when Nick Davis from The Guardian had wanted me to cough about phone hacking, and I had a dream about rabbits crawling all over me. I really don't like white rabbits. and this rabbit shot off, and this part of me, that frozen part, shot off after it. And next thing, I found myself falling down like a hole. I suppose it was a rabbit hole. I didn't think at the time. And I sort of landed on the bottom. And then I had I had this weird interchange with what I believe was a quino. But, I'd seen pictures of him on the net. He asked me, a few questions. Then I emailed him again, and I told him about the experience. And this time I said, "Oh, hi, Michael." I made it very, unprofessional. I said, "Hi, Michael. I do believe you gave me the first part of an interview with you in the shape of a white rabbit. Thanks very much for that. But can we meet in the normal way or talk over email? And, best wishes, Chris." Anyway, he came back to me and he said, "Oh, I'm going to have to get Grace to change the lyrics to the song." And he sent me a link, and I clicked on the link, and it sent me through to the Alice in Wonderland. Jefferson something?
Yeah, Jefferson Starship, Grace Lake.
Yes. Singing White Rabbit, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. He sent me that, and then, there went an interchange between me and Michael. We got to know each other over the email, and I did have another interchange with him. Again, it was kind of like in dream life. And then I did 2 interviews with 2 American journalists, Lorian Fenton and Douglas Dietrich, who worked with Aquino. And I started to have really weird stuff happen to me, really weird stuff. I found myself yanked out of my body. Just literally, I was laying on the bed and just pulled out of my body. And it seemed like an abduction. It was really freaky, and this went on for about 4 days around the time when I spoke to Lorian Fenton about Aquino, and it was awful. I had to go and see someone, a sort of someone who knew about spirituality, and I said, I can't go to sleep anymore. When I put my head down, I get dragged out of my body to this particular place. Yeah. And I was seeing all these visions of China dolls, and the China dolls would open their eyes, and instead of dead eyes, their eyes would be alive. Oh, it was really, and I had dreams about my face going on fire. It was just really nasty stuff. I can't tell you how horrible it was. And then what I did, Ed, I took In for the Kill, and I rewrote it, adding in Monarch Mind Control as if it happened to me. I had to make it a novel because I can't remember my orphanage. I can't remember the Jesuit priest that ran it. He was called Philip Harvey. He was made into a bishop. But I thought, well, right, let's do it as if he'd have done this marionette programming on me. And let's write the book as if that happened. And I went over it. And, instead of it being a woman just attracted to evil, the whole thing made much more sense. I've often heard testimonies from people that say they've had monarch mind control. And apart from James Casbolt, I often wonder where their missions were. And I feel, number one, that I was used to set off the phone hacking. Number two, my affair with the leader of the real IRA was to spy on him. And I feel that was someone else's agenda. Now when I look back after, instead of being in the dark after meeting Anna and these other Americans that have illuminated me to this, I can see that there's a pattern. Interestingly enough, I found it very hard to come to terms with the phone hacking because I was the one that started it and I was the one that finished it, yet I haven't... I mean, I was supposedly going to be called...
Wait. Let me ask this. What came first, the IRA or the phone hacking?
The IRA came first.
Well, then let me ask you this. Now, I hear you describe it as the real IRA. I've never heard that description before. I think I even Googled it the last time I talked to you. Here in America, we've only heard of the Irish Republican Army or the new. I've never heard the expression "the real IRA." What is that?
Well, I'm sure there's a few people listening that are going, "Oh, Ed, that's terrible."
Sorry.
That's okay. They're the Omar bombers. Do you remember the Omar bomb?
No.
Oh, gosh. What happened, the Provisional IRA did a deal with the British government to say that they were going to lay down their arms and basically, pal up with the Gerry Adams, Martin McGuinness, to pal up with the English. What happened, their weapons boys, and they had an IRA general called Michael McKevitt. Now, he came from South Armagh, which is the hard core of the Provisional IRA, okay? And what happened, they had a meeting in Donegal in a place called Gweedore where they decided to sign the Good Friday Agreement. Now, Michael McKevitt walked out and he said, no way, I'm going to carry on fighting the war. And all his boys from South Armagh, which is in fact the IRA, they walked away. And what happened? The press, as they were coming out, they said, "Oh, what's happened?" And they said, "Well, the IRA have given up their arms. They've gone in with the English." And one of them said, "Well, they're not the IRA. We're the IRA. We're the real IRA." Yeah. So after that, the media nicknamed them the real IRA, RIRA, as they're called, RIRA, and Provisional IRA is called PIRA. And
now, what year was this? What year did this take place?
Oh, golly, when was that? I think that was 1998. Yeah, 1998.
And how old were you?
Oh, gosh. If I tell you that, you'll work out how old I am now.
No one cares.
I was 30-something.
30?
Something.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Late 30s, let's say.
No, not late 30s.
I'll tease it. Go ahead. Okay.
Bloody early 30s. And, so what happened? The Real IRA blew up the town of Omagh and they killed 30 civilians, including women and children, in just a complete bloodbath. Horrible, really bad. But then they kept on going, actually. Then they started to bomb us. They did the Ealing bomb. They tried to bomb the BBC. And that was the time when all of a sudden, I'd had no interest in the IRA. All of a sudden, I felt this compulsion to, I was sent out to Belfast by the News of the World. I was working for the News of the World to cover a certain story. But all of a sudden, I found myself getting closer and closer and closer to the Real IRA. I ended up having an affair with the leader of the Real IRA. And I was getting fantastic stories. My stories were going in the Sunday Times. I was feeding them to the Sunday Times as well.
Now, let me ask you a question here. Now, the leader of the Real IRA, now, was he a public figure walking around in public, or was he living underground?
Oh, no. Well, he's public, yeah.
So he's a public figure?
Yeah, everyone knows who it is.
So he was not personally living underground. He was living in public. The police knew his whereabouts, where he was coming and going. He's
in prison now.
But at the time?
At the time, yeah.
So you were dating him publicly?
No. No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't dating him publicly because I'm a journalist. It was secret,
But intelligence agencies must have known that you were dating him because they they must have had this guy on a complete surveillance.
Yeah, I think I was told at the time my Real IRA stories were like bang on the button, but because they were on the front page, I upset quite a few different people. I put there were journalists in Ireland who've been studying the IRA for ages, and all of a sudden there's this little group who have split off, and the only person they'll speak to is this British blonde. Everyone was quite unhappy with me. It was like, who the hell are you?
So
and how come you're getting stories? What?
Then you must have been under surveillance as well.
I would say I was under surveillance. There was a guy called John Ross, and he worked for the News of the World. He was ex-flying squad, and he rang me up one day, and he went, he was a bit of a character, and he said, "Oh, hi, Chris." He said, "I just want to tell you that your apartment is wired for sound, and you're under surveillance every time you leave the house. I just thought I'd let you know." And I said, "Oh, why is that?" And he said, "Oh, because you're up the arse of the Real IRA, aren't you?" And there was another journalist called Peter Rose who threatened me. He said, because I was getting all this info for them and it was going in the newspaper and it was clear that I was, the News of the World were paying for me to fly out to South Armagh constantly. And they didn't, this guy, Peter Rose, who was a crimey there, he said to me, I've got an MI5 guy for you to meet. And I said, well, I know my own people in the security service. And he goes, no. He said, you'll do it the nice way or the nasty way, and he got the sack then for that. It made a little story in Private Eye magazine that Peter Rose didn't know how to deal with the News of the World's cloak and dagger, the way we behaved cloak and dagger. But I would say, yes, I was. Obviously, I was going out there, I was hanging out in their bars in Dundalk, and it's a no-go area. So I think probably I was, but it was weird. It's like one part of me was scared that, my apartment was wide for sound, and another part was just, this is great, sod them, who cares, And right. It's interesting, the I won't say the man's name, obviously. I don't want to, I've been told by the IRA to not talk on the radio, not talk on TV.
Great, thanks. Thanks a lot.
I don't want to get you in trouble. Well, when the book came out, the Sunday World did a big piece on it, and then the Irish radio came to me and said, would you do a piece? And I thought, and then somebody else came, and they were all interested in the real IRA and the fact I'd got, had this affair. And I rang, obviously I couldn't speak to the person I, had the relationship with. He was in prison. I spoke to his best friend, and he said, if you know what's good for you, you won't do any more publicity for your book. And I said, well, I want to. And they said, well, we're not happy about it. And they said, you're behaving in a bad way. So I said, well, fine. And I didn't at the time, so I was, quite nervous. But now all this MK Ultra stuff has come up. I'm thinking, why was I getting so close to the real IRA? I was going into pubs in Dundalk that nobody can go in. They're complete no-go areas. And I was in and out of them. I was in this guy's house. And, basically, was I spying? Was there a part of me that was triggered to do the dirty work of the state and to spy on this man, to put him away in prison? And, I don't know anything about it, and I certainly haven't been paid for it. I mean, when someone said to me about, would you ever spy, for MI5, you're so close to the real IRA, and I said, if you were a spy and you were with those guys at, 1 o'clock in the morning in a pub in Dundalk, and I said, they would smell it because, they're Irish, they've got a strong sixth sense, they're with you, they're smelling you. If you were a spy, they'd cut you up in little pieces. But what about someone who's spying who doesn't know they're a spy, who could have a good look round, who's friendly with who, what's this person's weaknesses, what's going on with them? And I was right in there, I really was. You only have to read my newspaper reports to see I was.
Well, let me ask you this now, okay, because now, looking back in hindsight, were there people who inserted themselves into your life that you believe could have been agents that were directing you and manipulating you?
Well, it's interesting. I made a friend of a guy called Hugh Burnett. And again, this is all checkable. Hugh Burnett is ex-MI6, and I was introduced to him by a guy I knew, and we became really close. And that was before I made contact at all, before I had any interest in Northern Ireland. I used to go around his house. He was very, very rich. He lived on Richmond Green. He's famous. He produced documentaries for the BBC. He died in 2012. He died. And we were best friends, basically. He was in my life. And he was ex-MI6. I didn't know he was ex-MI6 until he died. And I read his obituary in the Times.
So someone you trusted introduces you to this MI6 guy who has a lot of money and a lot of... Did he ever do any drugs with you, this guy?
No.
Okay.
We drank together, but no.
Okay. Now, and the guy you trusted. Now, was there anyone else that could have infiltrated your life at that time?
I don't know. I was pretty much a loner. I was very much a workaholic.
Okay. And then pretty much the next thing was this whole big, somehow, this is pretty remarkable to begin with, that you would find yourself in the middle of this active revolutionary group, the IRA, where they're actively doing, bombings and stuff. But then you also wound up in the middle of this UK cell phone hacking scandal.
Yeah, well, I was at the news all the time, and interesting, just one thing about the real IRA, they give me a bomb warning once. This guy rang me, I knew was one of them, because I'd gone to all their meetings in the South Armagh. I'd basically been commissioned, newspapers they'd caught on to me, and it got to a stage where every time the real IRA did something, TV and every newspaper ever would ring me and say, oh, what do the boys think about, why did they do that? And it was like I was becoming their unofficial press officer, which I felt quite uncomfortable about, being, they've actually killed people. I wasn't sure, I don't think I agree with their politics. So I thought, what's going on here? And interestingly, they rang me one time and they said, oh, what are you doing this afternoon? And I'm like, oh, nothing. And they said, be near the phone then at 2:00 this afternoon. Anyway, so I was in my flat and a phone rang. Didn't know the voice, Irish voice. Oh, go to a phone box and ring this number. Go to another phone box a while away. So I went to this phone box and they gave me another number at this other phone. Go to another phone box and ring this number. I thought, what the fuck is going on? Went on a couple of times, went to the last phone box and they gave me a code word that they'd had, and they Kerrygold with the butter, and they said we're gonna, if you don't release not release the political prisoners, if they don't give the prisoners political status, then we're going to start blowing up post boxes. And so I basically got a bomb warning, which was quite scary, which I gave straight. I just gave it to my editor, and I didn't hear anything after that, but that was quite scary. Moving on to do you want me to talk about the phone hacking?
Real quickly, though, keep in mind that if we use any obscenities, that we can still play the show. Yeah, I know. We can still play the show, but we have to mark it as adult content, and we'll get like half the views that we will get if we can just keep it family friendly. Okay, it's the best we can.
I swear.
I know. So do I, but what are you going to do? Okay.
Oh, sorry. No. Did I swear?
Yeah, you did a couple of times. Yeah, so we just got to keep a grip on it. I'll yell beep every time I hear it coming. Okay.
I'm sorry. I'll put lid on that. Sorry.
Don't worry. So now get into this thing with the phone hacking, because this is a huge. Rupert Murdoch had to step down over this. Correct?
It's interesting, Ed, and I hung out.
Let me ask you a question before we get into that. Do you want to take a little commercial break? We can take a nice little 4-minute break and play some ads.
Yeah, if you want to. Yeah.
Or you're on a roll.
Yeah, I'm on a roll. I can carry on.
Let's go.
My son. Interestingly, I hung out with Nick Davies. Now, Nick Davies, he wrote the book Hack Attack, and George Clooney is now. I believe that Nick is out in America. George Clooney is doing this film about the phone hacking based on Nick's book. Now, Nick paid me to spy on the news of the world for him. I spent a hell of a lot of time with Nick. He, when Nick first approached me, I said I didn't want to talk to him because I was quite scared. This was before the cops came to me. He said to me, did I know someone called John Boyle, who I did know? And I said, no, I've never heard of John Boyle, actually. And he said, oh, okay. He said, I heard you had a love affair with Greg Mislew, who was the news editor at the time. And I'm like, well, yeah, I might have done. And he said, I'd really like it if you spoke to me. Of course, I did this deal with Bianchi. I got my fair pay to get out there. And he accepted my journalism. He said he would pay me if I would spy on my former colleagues. And he wanted me to cozy up to my former lover, which was Greg Mislew, the news editor, and he wanted me to tape Mislew confessing to actually doing the hacking. So I said I would, basically because I wanted the money at the time. I took some money off of him, and I thought, well, I'm not going to do this. That makes me sound really horrid, but I was short of money at the time. I had no intention of doing it because I still had feelings for Greg Miskew, and but John Boyle, I didn't have feelings for. John Boyle, oh God, this is going to make me sound awful, but John Boyle, when I was 19, I dated him, and he's a very rich guy. He's a bit like, I don't know if you've seen the Tom Ripley films. He's a bit like, he lives in a mansion like Tom Ripley in the movies. It's literally, I know it's about £8 million worth of property. He lives in Peasmarsh. It's gated, and you know he's a real big shot. I wouldn't call him a private investigator. He hangs out with MI6, and he hangs out with companies like Hacklight, who and also KCS Limited, Stuart Paul Robb, who he's an ex-MI6 heavyweight.
How did you meet him at 19 years old?
Oh, well, basically, I went to work for him. I dotted around, you know, when I was a private investigator, I was a little bit, you know, blonde and sort of, I used to get bored very easily, and I went from one detective agency to another, to another, to another, to another. I just used to leave them. I just used to get very bored. And I found myself working for John.
Okay, but how? Like, you just went and walked up to his agency, you sent him a letter, you knew someone who worked there. How'd you wind up in there?
No, I just used to look through Yellow Pages. And,
okay.
I found him. Of course, I was experienced, and so he gave me a job. He's incredibly good looking. He looks a bit like a young Dirk Bogarde. Well, he's old now, but back then he was, God, just beautiful, and I couldn't believe it when I walked up to his office and saw him, and there was an immediate mutual attraction. He didn't believe that I was an experienced investigator, and I said, yeah, I can find people, I can find out how much money people have got, I can do whatever you want. And he didn't believe me, and he said, if you can, he said, I'm going to throw a lot of cash at you. And of course I ended up with my own office working for him, and we began an affair. He was married. Makes me sound horrid. Sorry.
You're 19 years old.
Yeah, and he's older. You know, he's got 20 years older than me. But that's no excuse, I suppose. No excuse.
Well, yeah, we all do stuff. You know, 19. What are you going to do? You know, we can't.
I mean, he was beautiful. What a beautiful man. And he's, of course, he's middle class. He's very well. He talks like that, you know, and he's sort of got the whole Hugh Grant thing going. You know, he's beautiful. He's well spoken. He was incredibly rich. He had a wine cellar, and you know, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, wine cellar. Yeah, sounds great. We should go
there. The wine cellar did it.
Yeah, let's swing by there right now. I can use a glass. Okay, so now, but then years later, now he contacts you and he wants you to spy on somebody else. About the
No, well, sadly, I had to, God, I sat 6 hours with Operation Wheating. I had to tell him all this. I mean, God, they must have thought I was, what happened, I left John, and I moved around, and he didn't want me to leave, but I left him and I moved around, and I worked for, you know, different agencies, CIX Limited, I did a bit for Kroll, only a small bit, Hacklight, who else? Oh, Argon. Then I went off to LA, came back, and I got all this confidence that came from somewhere, and I started to work for the News of the World. Okay. That's when I started to date the news editor, Greg Miskew. And
now let me ask you a question. Was it common knowledge at News of the World that this phone hacking stuff was going on?
Oh, it hadn't started yet. I haven't got to that bit yet.
Okay.
So this is about 1995. Yeah, 1995. It's before, I'm going back to, I didn't know the phone hacking had gone on till 2002. What happened? It was 1995. I started to work for the News of the World, and Greg Miskew was very, very excited by what I brought to the newspaper. I was very good at like blagging, which is I didn't like to do what private eyes normally do. I didn't like the bog standard work of tracing or asset searching, that kind of thing. I quite liked undercover, but I was very good at, say someone was having an affair with somebody, I could think up a ruse to get them to talk to me. Okay. I was very imaginative and creative and had quite a sharp sixth sense. And I could kind of look at somebody like, say, Bob Geldof and know that he was going to cough to me. And, I would think of a way of getting Geldof, which I did do, to talk to me and tell me different things,
oh, boy, you know what? We just did a whole show about that shooting in San Diego, about the I Don't Like Mondays shooting.
Really?
Yeah. We have to talk about that in the future. Do a whole interview with you about your connection with Geldof, because he's a fascinating character. You're familiar with Geldof and his daughter's connection to the OTO and stuff, right?
Yes.
And Geldof came out of nowhere over the first school shooting in America that there ever was.
I know. He's quite interesting, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, what do you make of all that? And how'd you get in touch with Geldof?
Oh, well, the News of the World have everybody's phone number.
Gotcha.
I mean, they are up the backside of absolutely everybody. It's the News of the World is a fascinating place. It's like a cult, and it's like it's layered. I hung around Fleet Street. Obviously, I had this boyfriend. Actually, interestingly, the boyfriend that I had years and years ago, who wrote the story on me and Brady. He was called Phil Hall. He, when I went to the News of the World, was the overall editor. So that was quite interesting. But he took me one time to a wine bar and he pointed out the News of the World. And there were these guys like dressed in Crombies smoking these cigars. And I thought, wow, aren't they fascinating? And this was the News of the World. I mean, the News of the World is such a dark, creepy place. Where it's all like on layers, like need to know. You get the sort of bog standard journalists who are kept in the dark on everything. Then you get the news editors who are connected up, but some of them aren't really connected up. And then you get the ones who are connected up to the top, like Rebecca, Mazza Mahmood. So they're like bishops. And then you've got, the lesser that you go down. It's like a chessboard. And it's a fascinating place.
And they have close ties with intelligence as well?
Oh, with everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, Phil Hall, my ex-boyfriend, he used to have breakfast with Tony Blair.
Oh, really?
And often, this is the News of the World. People think, they're out on their own. They were amazingly powerful. I mean, the things they knew about people. They had, when we used to have Christmas parties, Greg Miske used to bring me along on his arm because I was dating him, and they used to have MP secretaries going to the parties, and these MP secretaries used to spill the beans on what everyone was doing. I mean, it was unbelievable. The people that used to ring in and the people that used to mix with them, they were literally up there. It was an incredibly more powerful than the Times. I mean, it was an interesting place, and working there, you get to feel, my ego was very pumped up. You get to feel like almost like you're superior to the common man because you're in the know of what everyone's doing. And you get, you hear it first time, and you're really plugged into that political power. And of course, the parties that we had, they were always top cops were there. I didn't realize till obviously the phone hacking happened that they weren't supposed to be there.
Well, let me ask you this: did you see any signs? Because we've had guests on the show like Henry Vincent, who ran the DC Call Girl operation. Did you see any signs of whether at these parties where they would make drugs and underage prostitutes available to them, and then any kind of blackmailing and videotaping and stuff like that going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, of course. We all went off to bloody lap dancing clubs, and of course there was. Are we allowed to talk about coke?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, I'll talk about it.
Yeah.
How much?
That was happening. I mean,
okay.
the cops interviewed me for about 6 hours. I mean, I did, I coughed a lot. They asked me about the SAS, and, there's all this come out, the News of the World didn't use the SAS, it was all ex-SAS, but no, the News of the World decided that if they were ex-SAS, they were charging too much. So Greg Miskew, who was actually the villain of the whole piece, my ex-boyfriend, he he held a party and he said to all these ex-AS guys who ran this agency, a guy called Rab, he said, oh, bring everyone along and bring the guys that are serving. There was always champagne flying. Let's go to a club, exclusive clubs in London. Bring them all along. So it's got all these SAS guys who were serving, and Greg starts chatting them up. So we get the serving ones because he worked out that if we used the SAS that were serving, then they wouldn't be likely to grass on which celebrity we were watching,
right.
because they're not supposed to be moonlighting for the News of the World. And so what we had, a situation where politicians and celebrities were being monitored by the SAS under the control of the News of the World. That's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's fascinating, all through drugs and blackmail and bribery and prostitution, and amazing.
Well, you see, Ed, once they'd worked for them, then they had them by the short and curlies. Oh, you've worked for us now. Or, hang on, we've got a record here of this, so you best work for us again.
Right.
And literally, they used to find out as well about soap stars. There was one soap star we did, maybe I shouldn't say her name, but she had a pregnancy termination. They found out and they blackmailed her. They said, look, we're going to print this, and everyone will know that you murdered your baby. But so come forward and say that you lost it and you had a miscarriage. I couldn't believe it when I found out. I thought, no, surely they didn't actually, because another journalist told me. I said, surely not, to myself. And then, to my horror, there it was on the Sunday, on the front page, my trauma miscarriage, which they blackmailed this, little soap star into. You will know her name if I say her name because she hit it big in Hollywood. I best not say her name.
Okay, let's pass on that, yeah.
Oh, they used to do terrible things. They used to find out. I remember one time, Noel, that singer from Oasis, Noel, what's his name? Oh, God, I can't remember his name. They found out he had a love child, and it was like, Christine, go to the little school where the child is, go in and find out what his surname is. We know he's called, he or she, I can't remember now. They knew the kid's first name, but not the second name. Basically, find some way to get in the school and get the lists. And they sent me to do that. And I'm sitting outside this school in Kensington thinking, well, this is impossible. And Greg rang me and he said, oh, don't worry, you're called off the job. No, he said, don't worry. He said, we've called in the SAS.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, what are they going to do? Abseil through the bloody window of the school? Sorry, I've sworn. But no, this SAS guy walked down the street towards me and he said, oh, Christine. I said, yeah. And he said, follow me. So I followed him into the school. He walked right down the corridor, walked up to the headmistress's office, barged in there, started pulling off things off the wall, grabbing things from her desk, stuffed them all under his jacket and walked out.
Get out of here.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I thought, oh, my God. Oh, my God. And they got the child's details.
So they were actually hiring thugs to go in there and forcibly just take stuff. And then if they're doing that, they have to also be doing burglaries as well.
Oh, they were doing burglaries. Yeah. They were doing burglaries. They hired people to do burglaries. I mean, I told the cops quite a lot of stuff.
Now, was any of this followed up on when you started confessing?
Absolutely nothing. And I coughed the lot as well. I coughed a lot to the cops. I then...
now, when you use the expression coughed, that means that you informed.
Yeah, I did inform because I was quite annoyed at that time. There was also threats going around as well. I told a journalist, I won't say her name, I told a journalist that I was going to speak to the cops. Well, the cops told me, can you come and see us? So I said, yeah, fine. And they said, she said to me that anybody caught talking to the cops was going to get it. And she said, seriously hurt. And I said, well, I don't think they could do anything. But interestingly, what happened, the cops rang me, Operation Wheating, who was investigating the phone hacking. They rang me and they said, your name has been found in a notebook to Clive Goodman. the royal editor that had done the phone hacking. And similarly, it said my name, Christine Hart, private investigator, that introduced the News of the World to the phone hacker. And I said to him, well, hang on now. I said, there's someone else in, because the phone hacker was just a clean skin, like a patsy called Glenn Mulcair. I knew Boyle was the main one. But I said, listen, no. I said, the person you want is called John Boyle. And I was talking to John Boyle at that time. And the cop said, we need to speak to you. Will you talk to us? So I said, yeah, where do you want me to go? And they said, well, can we come to your home? And I said, well, I don't really want you to. I said, what about meeting at my tennis club? And bizarrely, when I went to my tennis club, I thought I was going to meet them like in the bar area, because another Operation Tilliter, who was doing the computer hacking, had come and spoke to me as well. But when I got there, they'd hired out a bloody room. Sorry, I saw it again. They'd hired out a room in my tennis club. Can you believe that? They rang the management of my tennis club and they'd hired out a room. Couldn't believe it.
Oh, I believe it. Now, describe to people what the whole phone hacking scandal was.
Well, I'll do it as if you're the cops. Basically, I went and sat and spoke to the cops. I was there for 6 hours. I dropped my son at school. I went to the club. They were up in this room. I went up to the room, and I was there till 3 o'clock. I said, I'm going to have to go because I've got a child. I've got to go and pick him up. But basically, I sat there. They said, right, you're the one that brought in phone hacking. And I said, no, I beg to differ. I said, I most certainly wasn't. I said, I was working for the News of the World. I was earning about 100 grand a year. I was doing all their investigations. Pretty happy, pretty well respected. I was working with Mazza, and I loved my job. What happened one day, Greg Miskew said to me, I want you to do some phone numbers, find out who's on the other end of a phone number. And so basically, I mean, you can do it all, as you know, there's ways of doing it, but I wasn't about to ring up the phone company and blag them. I can do that, but that takes like an hour per, I thought of myself at that point as more of an executive. I wasn't going to all of a sudden start doing your bog standard, phone numbers.
Yeah, scut work.
Seemingly, what?
Well, we call it scut work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I, at that point, wasn't going to go back to who I was when I was 19, thanks very much. And similarly, I think he was using a private investigator called John Rees, and John Rees had been put in prison for attempted murder, I think, something like that. So then he was giving me his work that he used little kids to do or whatever he used. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do this. And he started putting all these numbers onto me, and then he shouted at me over something. So we knew each other intimately. He felt as if he could shout at me, and he was coming around my flat all the time during the day as well, and telling me how depressed he was with his wife. And basically, he was kind of leaning the paper. Basically, the News of the World is run by the news desk. It's a very hard job. The overall editor, Phil Hall, they're swanning around having lunch with God knows who. But the news editor, the weight of the newspaper is on their shoulders. And Greg was carrying it, but he was carrying around and putting it on my shoulders. And I ended up sort of feeling that it was too much for me, actually. And I had a friend at that time who was from the Daughters of St. Paul. She was called Sister Mary Lou. She was an American nun. I got very close to her. And I complained to her about it. I said, look, I can't handle it. She got very involved with me, and she said, what you should do is introduce, because I said there's a guy called John Boyle, who I know does this kind of growth work. He will give it to people he's got in his office. And she said to me, you must introduce John Boyle to the News of the World. Because I thought, I was in two minds, because John Boyle is, he's a Mr. Big. He's, I thought, well, might he not queer my pitch in some kind of way? So I thought, well, I'm not going to do something like that. And I went into hospital. One time I I'd gone down, there was a gym. I lived in a really swanky penthouse apartment next to the News of the World. There was a gym below it. So I went down, had a swim, and I was lifting some weights, and I came back up to my apartment, and Greg phoned me, and he was shouting down the phone about, I think it was the Yorkshire Ripper's wife, and find out where she is, she's getting married. And as he did that, I felt my heart beat really, really fast, and then I blacked out. And I came round again a bit, and I managed to tell the porter downstairs to ring an ambulance. I thought I was having a heart attack. So I was rushed in an ambulance to hospital, and I was strapped up to all these things. And to my horror, who appeared by my bedside as I was strapped up, but Greg Miskew, the editor of the News of the World. I couldn't believe it. I mean, he was the last person I wanted to see. I was laying there literally covered in sweat, pale face, and it was like the devil had appeared, you know? And I started crying. I said, please go away. I said, I've just had a heart attack. I need to, please go. Anyway, he wouldn't go. He wouldn't go. It was mad. Anyway, the doctor came to speak to me in Greg's earshot, and he said, your heart is fine. You just had a panic attack. So Greg was standing there laughing. He thought it was all very funny. And we went for a drink in the pub. And I said, I don't think I can do this anymore. I'll introduce you to John Boyle. So he said, oh, great. And I said, give me a few days off. And he said, well, do this job for us on the Yorkshire Ripper. He said, do that tonight. God, what a man. You're ill, but whatever. So I did the job on the Yorkshire Ripper. That's how dependent he was on me.
Wait, 1 second. What kind of job did you have to do on the Yorkshire Ripper?
Oh, his wife was getting married. He didn't know where she was getting married. He didn't know the details. So I had to find that out for him.
Okay.
And at the time, I was also working for the Sunday Mirror, doing the same thing. And I was also working for the Daily Mail, doing the same thing. So I was earning a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. But people were coming to me with Mission Impossibles, and I was doing them. So I got quite a good reputation. And so I then rested for a couple of days, and my only contact at that point was the nun, my auntie's best friend, Sister Mary Lou. I don't know why I was hanging out with her, but anyway, I thought to myself, well, what the hell was wrong with me that I was thinking of introducing the News of the World, Greg, Mr. John Boyle. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do that. And Greg rang me, and he said, oh, Chris, John Boyle. And I said, no, I don't think so. I said, no, I work for you. That's fine. I'm not going to introduce you to another private investigator. And he said, well, that's made me a bit angry. And I said, well, bad luck. And he said, okay, I get it. He said, oh, Chris. I said, yeah. He said, I'm just curious, how do you spell Boyle? And of course I thought, how dare you try and blag me, How dare you take me as an idiot that I tell you how to spell his name and you track him down and say, hey, I've got work for you. And so I said, B-U-R-L-E. And I could hear him because I knew he knew that I was lying. That's not how you spell his name. It's B-O-Y-A-L-L. And he slung the phone down on me, didn't even ask how I was. And I thought, thanks very much. That's it. I'm not even going to date him anymore. This is mad. He slung down the phone, didn't even ask how I was. And I emailed Sister Mary Lou to tell her. Anyway, she rang me and she said, Christine, you must introduce John Boyle to the News of the World. You must. And I'm like, oh. And I remember putting the phone down, and this is so weird when I think back to the Control, the MK Ultra, whatever. If I hadn't have done this, there'd be no phone hacking. I put the phone down from her. I immediately went across the room to check something on the email, and I walked back across the room. I picked up the phone, and I rang Greg Miskew, and I said, I will introduce you to John Boyle. And he went, what? In a really annoying way. And I said, I will introduce you to John Boyle. And he said, oh, set it up for tonight. So I rang John, and I set the meeting up. And that evening, he told him about hacking that evening.
What year was this? What year was this?
Oh, that was, God, it was 1997.
You sure? Okay, yeah, that's what. Yeah, okay, 1997. Okay.
Yeah, 1997. And from that moment on, I mean, literally, my phone hadn't stopped going. I saw John. This make me sound bad, but I saw John after he'd met Greg. We went out for dinner again. He came back to my flat, and he said to me, "Oh, Chris, I haven't got your." He had my home line. He said, "Chris, I haven't got your mobile." And I remember my stomach churning and feeling really bad. And he said, "And give me your email." And he said it in such a crafty way. But I gave him my mobile and I gave him my email. And from that moment on, I didn't receive. And I had a business earning a hell of a lot of money. It was like it was like a Christmas tree that all of a sudden you pulled the plug, there was no lights in it. I was out of business. I was absolutely finished. I was finished. Absolutely finished. He finished me. He took me down. Absolutely. He brought in phone hacking, and the press were like, yes, party time. Just completely, I was done.
Because what did he do? He picked up all the contacts in your phone and all your address book and he contacted all your sources?
Yeah, yeah.
And no one tipped you off and said, "Hey, Christy, this guy's trying to cut you out"?
Nope, they didn't. That's nice, isn't it? That's Fleet Street for you. That is Fleet Street for you.
But it's very interesting that, again, the person who came in and was handling you in this situation was this nun. Now, how did she come back into your life?
Well, my aunt was always in my life. I mean, interestingly, she took me to Disney World when I was like, when I was back.
I think you told me you were 13 last time we talked about this.
Yeah, I went out there to try and be a novice nun in Boston. God, how old was I? It was before I went back into care, so I must have been maybe 11 or something like that. And they kept me at the convent. And after I was there, even though my adopted parents, my adopted brother came to the convent in Boston, I was kept somewhere separate. And I wasn't kept with the other girls. There was other girls. I was kept separately. And she then took us down to Miami, Florida, and we went to Disney World. She was always in my life.
Let me ask you a question. She could afford that? Did you fly down to Florida? Did you take a train or a bus? What?
Jeez, God. Actually, I can't remember. I think, we flew. We went to Boston. We stayed there, and then we stayed in a motel, and she was somewhere else, but she came to be with us again at the motel. We must have flown, but I can't remember.
Because that's not a cheap... and you had another kid with you, a brother or sister or something was with you as well?
Yeah, my brother.
Yeah, that's not cheap. Yeah. Okay.
She was always in my life. We used to go to church. We used to go to church all the time. I used to go to the convent. That's how I met Mary Lou. She was American. I like Americans, so we got pally. Even though she's the same age as my auntie, actually. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because I had a really bad time after. Obviously, it's hard. 1 minute you're earning $100,000 a year and you're in a little Lotus sports car. Everyone thinks you're the bee's knees. To absolutely the plug has been pulled on it, and I went through quite a bad time over that.
But that was that the extent of your involvement, though, in the hacking case? Was that
No. What happened? I went off to live in Belfast at that point, and I threw myself into reporting on the Real IRA because I didn't really have anything else going on. It was like I had to be a journalist, and I had to leave behind investigations. They didn't want me. I mean, they didn't want me anymore. It was like it was Hack City for both the Sunday Mirror and the News of the World. So
give us an idea of some of the people that were hacking.
What?
Give us an idea of some of the people that the Rupert Murdoch was hacking in these days.
They were hacking everybody. They were doing about 50 a day. They were just hacking. Investigations didn't take place anymore. Mazza Mahmood was ringing me, the fake sheikh. We were friends. He was ringing me. He was going crazy about it. He was saying they don't do investigations. They just stopped everything and became They became a private investigators, but a dirty private investigators, courtesy of Mr. Boyle.
Now, what were they able to get in this hacking? Because now the method that I'm aware of is that you would spoof the caller ID number. You could call up somebody's cell phone and access their voicemails and record all their voicemails.
Well, what I got told, because when the cops were interviewing me, I was talking to Boyle, and what happened, Boyle was doing it until 2001, and what Greg did, Greg is so sneaky, Greg decided that because Boyle was charging him probably about $1,000 a hack, knowing Boyle a lot anyway, because obviously he's, a big shot. He had brought in 2 guys who he'd trained to do it. Obviously, when you get young guys in, they pay them peanuts, don't they, to do the sort of groat work. And what Greg did, because he was going through and speaking to one of them, he nicked him. He said, look, you can earn a lot of money working for us. Just do it straight for us and blow out Boyle. Right. So in 2001, Glenn Mulcair, who everybody knows as the phone hacker, who everybody calls a private investigator, but actually he wasn't a private investigator. He was an office boy for a private investigator. That's why. You see, because, Ed, it actually insults private investigators, because people think, who's a private investigator that hacked the royal family? Oh, they're all stupid. Well, actually, no. Private investigators know that you can't hack the royal family. They've got a ring of fire around them. Glenn Mulcair was an office boy. He was a footballer. He was someone that Boyle brought in. He knew he could pay him $20,000 a year. He taught him all the tricks under the sun. And the News of the World thought, right, we'll grab him. And they put him on staff. And it's completely insane. But at that point, Greg Miskew started to think, well, hang on, there's this big shot John Boyle. Now, John Boyle has property in Aspen. He has his £8 million house. He's respected by MI6. And Greg Miskew thought to himself, well, I'd like to be a private investigator. They drag in lots of money. This guy's a big shot. And he started to think about when he would leave the News of the World. So what he did, he started to run the News of the World like it was a private investigation company. And he fantasized that he could leave, set up shop, and have, Mulcair and maybe some other people, and he could grow to have a property for $8 million. He wasn't really happy doing what he was doing. So he basically stole Mulcair, kept him under his wing, had him as his person. He acted like a private investigator. And what the News of the World themselves did, what Phil Hall did, Rebecca at this time was working for The Sun. She didn't know anything about it. What they did, they got a porter cabin at the back of the office, and they called it the investigations department, when all it was Greg sitting there with Mulcair, who was mostly out of the office, a few other journalists they got, and they were operating as a detective agency, but within the News of the World. I mean, it was completely crazy. I used to go in and out of it, and I thought, because I know private investigation companies, it was a farce. It was a farce. It was really, I can't, sorry, I'm speechless, because the whole thing, it was pathetic,
In what way?
Well, detective agencies, the best, and I'd work for the best, Hacklight, Kroll, KCS, Argod, you don't, you watch what you do. Okay, there is criminal stuff that goes on. If you do something criminal, you're careful about it. You're careful who your target is. You think about that. You shred anything straight away afterwards. It's a proper business to be taken seriously. They were sitting there. They were hacking everybody. They were keeping the paperwork lying around. Wow. Mulcair kept all his paperwork. He was listening in to the royal family. It was just insane.
But
and,
they had no fear. They had no fear of any kind of repercussions.
Yeah, because basically, Ed, they're not private investigators. They just like to think they were. They didn't know the business. But what Greg did, he stole Mulcair. He was so envious of John Boyle because he isn't impressive. He's, James Bond glamorous character. He thought, well, I want that kind of power. He stole his boy, and he thought by stealing his office boy, he could become him. But Boyle, he knows about private investigations. He knows who to look at. who not to look at, when to use something like hacking, when to not use something like hacking. They're still doing it, but these are very highly intelligent, very clever people.
Right.
But Miscue took it, and he was in this little porter cabin at the back, and he was thinking, oh, private investigators, they just hack anybody, they get away with it. But of course they don't get away with it. And of course what happened, what happened is what happened, It went, it hit the ground, but actually I played a part in, not only I played a part in bringing it in, I played a part in crashing it, because what happened, I came back from, I was over in Belfast, and I was also, because a lot of the journalists over there were saying that I was a real IRA supporter, and because my stories were so good, and they were saying, well, the only reason the real IRA speak to you is because you're a supporter. And I wasn't a supporter. I started to do some stuff on the UDA, and I got, again, very close to a guy called John White, and John White was coming around my house, and I'd rented a big house in South Belfast, and then on a different occasion, someone from the Real IRA was coming around my house, and it got to a point where I was being told that my life was in danger because the Real IRA had me under surveillance, because they were wondering what I was doing with the UDA, and the UDA were, interested in my relationship with the Real IRA, and I thought, I don't like what's going on here, and I'm perhaps out of my league with these people, and so I disappeared overnight. I just left, and I came back to London, and I was pregnant actually, and I went to Greg Miscue, and I said, please, help me. You stop using me as an investigator. I don't know what's gone on. This is in 2003.
Okay.
And I said, I need work. And he said, we don't do this, and pull the plug on him. As you know, in that industry, it's not wise to make enemies, because people can,
make trouble.
Yeah. But I was quite annoyed at this point. So I rang, the first person I went to was Boyle, and I said, oh, John, it's me, what's going on? I said, I haven't rung you in ages, but, as soon as I brought you into the News of the World, everything went for Sunday Mirror. And he went, oh, Chris, it wasn't me. Oh, I didn't work for them anymore. They dropped me in 2001, and obviously he'd brought it all in, and he didn't know what had happened. They'd basically given him the same line all of a sudden. Oh, we don't need you. And I said, do you know someone called Glenn? And he went, you're kidding. And I said, why? And he went, he's my office boy. He said, you're kidding. I said, well, he's Greg's personal assistant. And he said, I'm not going to have it. He said, I'm going to take him down. And literally, it wasn't long after that. He was arrested. He was arrested at gunpoint, actually.
So you think Boyle was behind taking everybody down, but Murdoch actually had to step down from the chairman of News of the World?
Oh, did he?
I think so, yeah. Listen, we're down to about 6 minutes, okay? We didn't take any commercial breaks at all, and I want to keep this at an hour and 20 minutes, at 2 hours exactly, so we can play this on all the different stations. Because this is a really good show. There's a lot of good information came out tonight. So we're down to about 6 minutes. Can you sum all this up in 6 minutes, the whole thing?
Well, I don't know. I mean, David Icke, I know he's unpopular. I like him. He said that, this has gagged the British press, and it has gagged the British press. And, was it a setup? Was I controlled to bring Boyle in? And, was I controlled to then, tip Boyle off so he brought it down? I mean, interestingly, I thought I was going to be in Nick Davies' book, and I thought, Boyle, obviously, you'd think phone hacking, well, obviously, where's Boyle? He's this fascinating character. Of course, he's going to be in the book. He wasn't. He got a line in the book. He got a line in Nick Davies' book. Wow. So when Clooney does the film for Hollywood, you're just going to get Glenn Mulcair, private investigator, British private investigator, who was hacking the royals. Now, Ed, as a private investigator, that actually isn't a true portrayal as a private investigator. So we've got a Hollywood movie out there with the important factor left out. The important factor is actually MI6, because they're connected with Boyle. He works for them. Was it orchestrated? Was the fall of the News of the World orchestrated so the state could gag the British press. I think so.
Gotcha. Oh boy. Okay. How can people reach you if they want to get a hold of you? Or do you have a website besides these two books? The In for the Kill, A True Story of Hunting Evil, and the other one is Searching for Daddy.
Yeah. I don't have a website. I don't really have much conversation with my publisher. I suppose Facebook. I'm on Facebook. Christine Joanna Hart on Facebook, or yeah.
You can always contact me at oppermanreport@gmail.com, and I'll forward a message for you.
Yeah,
but not the IRA. Okay, you guys. I'm not helping those guys out. I got enough trouble.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God. Well, this is fascinating information. Okay, and I can kind of see where you're looking back and saying, hey, where have I been handled? And who's moving me along and who's been manipulating me throughout all these years, especially when you come out of an orphanage.
Yeah, well, exactly. I'd never heard of monarch mind control. When Anna contacted me, I immediately thought, oh, that's insane. But then, over a time and having those experiences with Aquino, etc., I come to think, well, I look back and I think things that didn't make sense. I mean, basically, when you lose $100,000 a year, I had a certain lifestyle. Right. Now, I'm basically poverty-stricken single mother. I had this amazing lifestyle. And, I think back to the moment when I picked up the phone, I'd made a decision not to introduce him. I get that phone call, and I just see myself picking up the phone and saying, even Miss Q was surprised, I mean, what's with that? Someone rings me, and then I do something like that sets things in motion. I mean, I have to live with that, right. And I have to live with that was my whole career.
Just to be clear, though, now in the last 3 minutes or so, your contact with Aquino was some emails back and forth. Now, since we had our last conversation, have there been any more email contact back and forth with Aquino?
I don't think so. Okay. There might have been a little bit, but it tailed off. He was boring me a little bit. He was going on about the Egyptian religions, and after a while, talking to him, Yeah,
because that is his thing, is the Temple of Set, which is the back to pyramids.
He's still into that.
Yeah, well, that's his thing. Yeah. All right. Well, we were here tonight with Christine Joanna Hart, a UK journalist, private investigator involved in the UK wiretapping, the phone hacking scandal, involved with the real IRA. She interviewed these serial killers. First, Ian Brady, which is a fascinating story, has some kind of a occult ritual background with him, and then also to Ken Bianchi, the Hillside Strangler. Christine, I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Thanks very much. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, we got to have you back to get into some more of this detail. I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about Bob Geldorf and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Because he seems to have a whole thing going on around him as well. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, good night. We thank you all, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Ed. Bye.
Bye.